Okay, so first of all, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Again, thank you for being here with us today. Now, the presentation is going to be broken up into two parts. And the first part, we're going to talk about our students' favorite ever topic, the students' favorite subject, which is also known as grammar. I'm sure students around the world are always very, very happy to be doing grammar. So what I would like us to talk about today is maybe the reasons why students don't like grammar, what it is that we can do to make them like it more or to make it more interesting for them in the classroom, and how that can affect their learning overall. Now, before I get started, you might ask me, well, Christy, it's not the most important for students to like grammar. They just have to learn how to do it. They just have to learn it. But actually, ladies and gentlemen, the more students actually like it, the more likely it is for it to be more efficient and much more effective. The more likely it is for them to learn it and to use it correctly in the future, which of course is what we all want overall. Now, before I get started, I'd like to have a little icebreaker with you guys. I've got a little video which shows sometimes why students may or may not like grammar. But before we get to that part, I would like to hear your side first. I want to hear your experiences first. When you tell your students, okay, boys and girls, today we're going to do some grammar in the classroom, do your students look happy like you're seeing here in this picture? Or do your students look a bit more like this? Okay, let me see some messages then. Let's have a look. What's in the chat? Okay, let's have a look. What about you, ladies and gentlemen? Do your students look happy when you're doing grammar, or do they look sad? Now, usually when I've spoken with very right picture most of the time, absolutely, yeah. Exactly. So the reason I was doing this, because I've had this conversation with quite a few of my colleagues, and quite often grammar is known as being the student's worst subject. So why do we think this is happening? So I have a little video here for you, which really kind of gets the gist of why students don't like grammar. Okay, let me just move on. Let's watch.
English is so weird. Really? I think it's very easy. No, that's crazy. Like the plural of animals. Oh, that's easy. Like cat, cats. Just add a plural s. Oh, really? So the plural of goose is gooses. No, the plural of goose is geese. It's because it's goose, you know. So goose, geese. Then the plural of moose is meese. No, wait. Plural of moose is moose. It's because it's a moose, then moose. What? But how's that? What's this? That's an ox. That one's easy. You tell me the plural. Is it oxes? Ooks? It cannot be eeks. It's oxen. It's because it's ox, so the plural is oxen. See? Very...
Okay, now this might be a funny sketch about grammar, but the fact is, ladies and gents, this is the thing that students are having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. They're having to deal with grammar, which is full of rules and regulations, yet just as many exceptions to every rule. So we have to find a way to make that more bite-sized, more interesting, and less intimidating for the students. So what I have here are some activities. Now, in your opinion, what do these activities, what are they practicing? Let's have a look. Just have a look here at the pictures. So you have 3 different activities. What are they practicing, do you believe? So the middle one always says it on its own, okay? So the middle one is grammar translation method. We all know what that is. Okay, practice and forms, absolutely. Yeah, so all 3 of these activities actually test and are practicing grammar. Now, what I want us to talk about before we talk about how we can make it more interesting for students is how grammar has changed over the last few years. I don't know about you, ladies and gents, but when I was a student, grammar was taught very differently to what it is taught now. So when I was a student, we did do the grammar translation method. My teacher would make us learn the grammatical rules off by heart. They would make us learn all the tenses and the structures and the uses, and without much practicing, but we would have to learn the rules off by heart. And ask me, did that make it any better? Did that help me learn my grammar? No, absolutely not. What it made me do is not want to do grammar, like you were saying to me in your messages before. Now, on the left and the right, we have two other grammar activities, which is our word formation and our gap fill, so multiple choices, okay? Now, both of these activities are still used in our lesson in doing grammar or even for use of English and so on. Absolutely, I'm not in any way saying we shouldn't use these. What has changed now is that we use these along with other things that we can do in the classroom, like these activities, for example. So like here. So these three activities are also practicing grammar, okay? These activities are also helping students activate and practice the knowledge of grammar, but in a bit more of a fun way by using pictures and graphics. Now we use videos, we can have audio to help consolidate that information. We here, for example, the exercise in the middle, we have 4 uses. They have to put with the right grammatical tenses, for example. On the picture on the right, the students have to talk about it. So the way that grammar has changed, comparison to when we were students, not so long ago, I'm sure, it's changed in the sense that it's now much more communicated. Grammar is not just about learning the grammatical structure and practicing through gap fill. Yes, we will do that as well, but actually we want to talk about it in pair work. We want to talk about it in group work. We want to do a presentation about it. We want to do a project about it. We want to use it in more realistic scenarios overall. And that's what's changed with grammar in general. So after lots of research from even my own students or from various students that I've happened to meet from around the world and different conferences that I've been to, these are the 5 main issues that students are facing when they're practicing or they're having to learn grammar. So let's have a look at what these 5 things are. First of all, quite often they feel that they lack confidence in their ability to use grammar for communication. So they feel they get too worried, they get too stressed about having to use the grammar. So quite often they might just avoid it altogether, like you mentioned before in your messages. They feel like, oh, I can't do this. You know what? I'm not going to do it at all. Now, the second issue is that students quite often feel overwhelmed by the volume of information, especially when it comes to grammar. So if students are being taught too many grammatical structures at the same time, this can be very overwhelming and they end up learning nothing, as we all know. The third issue is that students don't always understand or see the practicality of learning or studying grammar. Quite often students might say, but miss, I'm not going to be a teacher. I don't need to know grammar. I don't know if any of you have ever heard this wonderful phrase before. But we know, and obviously on the inside, we laugh because we know that grammar is a valid point of any language. But we have to help them understand why it's so important for them to know. Now, the fourth issue is students don't like doing grammar homework. Now, I don't know about you, how students are in Vietnam, but students, for example, in England, don't like doing homework in general. So we have to find different ways to make the homework more engaging and much more interesting for the students. And last but not least, students quite often equate having good grammar with mastering terminology. So quite often students think, if I do my grammar translation method, if I know my structure off by heart, that's it. I'm very good at grammar. But actually, we know that's not true. To be good at grammar, you have to use it in a communication, a conversation, written or verbal form. So what I would like us to do for the next few minutes is I would like us to take these 5 issues and see how we can help our students tackle these issues in the classroom or when they're doing homework at home. First of all, so the first issue, lacking confidence in their ability to use grammar. In order for us to help students tackle this, the only way there is to help them to use communicative activities in the classroom as much as possible whilst using grammar. And of course, variety is key when it comes to this element of the classroom work. So what we're going to do is we're going to help our students realize that grammar isn't just about a gap fill. We will also do that, but we need to use it when we're communicating, whether that be in written form, especially in verbal form. So, for example, let's have a look here. We'll do activities that have different essences to it. So, for example, on the left, you can see the top left corner. Here we have a gap fill exercise. Fair enough. And then they're going to listen to the questions. And then with an arrow top to bottom, they're going to write down the intonation. Why? Because we want to make sure students are learning grammar whilst also saying it correctly. Then you can do activities such as using sentences to describe yourself, talk to your partner about it. Then we can work in groups of 4. One member will say a sentence, the other one will put emphasis on different information in the sentence, if that is the grammatical structure that they were taught earlier on that lesson. Okay, or tell your partner your predictions about the future, so we can use your future tense that you just learned, for example. So the best way for students to gain confidence in their ability to use grammar for communication is through us helping them do as many communicative activities as possible throughout our lessons, so they understand that grammar isn't this cold thing that we just learn off by heart and we have to do a test at the end of the module. Grammar is something that's very much alive into our language. Now, however, of course, just like any kind of communicative activity, which I will talk about in the next session as well, in order to get to the end result, when students will be talking, will be doing pair work and group work, or they will be presenting to you, for example, we have to have scaffolding, of course, absolutely. So, for example, here we have students will be learning past simple and past continuous, okay? So we will present the grammatical structure to the students. They will activate it, of course, instantly in order for them to be able to remember in the future, okay? They will do some more controlled practices, as you can see here. So you've got, here they have to add the match the sentences to the uses in the first exercise. In the second exercise, they have to choose the best out of the 2 options in each of these sentences. Then we're going to still very controlled, but just a little bit freer practice here. They have to put the words in the brackets in the correct form of past simple or past continuous. Then here, again, they have to put the words in the brackets in the correct form in the past simple or past continuous, but they also have to then write down the short form, the short answer, sorry. And last but not least, and after they've done this, they have to fill in these sentences, and then they have to present them to the class or talk to the partner or anything along those lines. So we don't go from, oh, here's a present continuous, sorry, past continuous, past simple, talk about it. We build up on it, because just like any communicative activity, but especially when it comes to doing grammatical communicative activities, it's very, very important that students feel confident and secure when it comes to actually communicating. Now, the third issue, students quite often feel overwhelmed by the volume of information. Now, I don't know if this is something you have come across with your students. There's something I used to come across when I first started out as a teacher, and the solution to this, and I'm sure you already know this, is bite-sized information. We are talking about students of 2023 who are used to having input in very, very small pieces and small chunks of information. So they are used to watching 20-second videos, 10-second videos, small paragraphs for, instead of, entire essays like we were. So the information that they're able to digest and to work on has to be bite-sized also. So how do we deal with students who are overwhelmed by the volume of information? We break it down. So for instance, I showed you my previous example. I'll just go back to here. Past simple and past continuous, okay? And of course, activation of this grammatical structure, and then students will talk about it. But actually, the author in this unit also wanted to teach students about cleft sentences, okay? So we all know cleft sentences is when we want to put emphasis on a certain part of a sentence, okay? So cleft sentences are quite often paired with past simple and past continuous, but we didn't teach it all at the same time to students. We didn't say past simple, past continuous, clef sentences, do it all at the same time. No, we took it step by step. So first, we did the past simple, past continuous. We activated it through scaffolding. We got to communicative activity. So students now feel confident. They feel okay, like, okay, I can practice this. I can talk about past simple, past continuous. And then in the next part of that lesson, we're teaching them about clef sentences, which as well will follow the same tactic. Controlled practice at the beginning, so students feel confident and comfortable taking in this information. And then, of course, we're going to make it more freer practice, and eventually we'll do communicative activity by talking to the partner about it or presenting the class or doing some group work about it. So the best way for students to feel less overwhelmed by the volume of information is to break it down step by step. By the end of the year, the students will have learned the same amount of grammar as they would have if we had done it differently. The difference is they will, when they're at the end of the year, they will have a more positive outlook on grammar, and they will be able to recall and remember much more of that information because, first of all, we've broken it down, and second of all, because we don't just activate the information, do it through gap fills or formations, we do it through communicative activities as well. Like here, for example, at the end of the lesson, they will end up working in groups of 4 and so on and so forth. Now, let's go on to our next issue. Students don't like doing grammar homework. I know, I'm sure you are terribly shocked that students don't like doing homework. I was shocked as a teacher when I found out. I thought students loved doing homework all the time. Unfortunately, that is not the case. So here's the thing, guys. These examples that I'm showing you now, for instance, okay, they are from the Bright title, which is ministry approved in Vietnam, okay, from Express Publishing and DTP. Now, the book is a fantastic book, and I'm going to tell you all about that later. However, the ones that bring the book to life are you, ladies and gentlemen, the ones that make the book magical, the ones that engage the students, the ones that make it fun and interesting and obviously efficiently in a learning way as well. That is all you. So when your students go home, unfortunately, you are not there with them. So we have to make sure that the activities that are done at home are as engaging as possible, as interesting as possible, and not boring in any way. That's very, very important, very, very crucial. So, for example, here I have 3 different activities for you I want to show you. Now, what I want you to notice is there are stars on the top left corner of each of the activities. Now, these stars have been put there to show the level of difficulty. So some will be more challenging for students, some will be less challenging. This in itself is already more captivating for students. Also, you'll notice that there's a variety of different activities. We're not only going to do gap fill. Here we have broken sentences that students have to write down correctly with the right form of past simple or past continuous. Then students will have to rephrase the sentences, or students have to use the right sentences in the gaps. So, and of course, this is just a small example. There are many, many, many wonderful activities that you can do. So variety is key. Now, I have another little thing I would like to share with you also, though. Now, for those of you who have been using our material or who would like to, along with the actual printed book, which works just as well as a standalone product, let me clarify this. However, for those of you who use interactive material in the classroom, you could also use the interactive whiteboard software. So why am I saying this to you? Let's say students, let's say you're going to tell your students, okay, boys and girls, on Friday, we're going to do an end of module test, which we all have to do at the end of each module, right? Okay. Now, however, what if instead of telling them you have to do an end of module test, so they have to prepare or do homework for it, what if you told them that you're going to do a quiz at the end of your module? So you're going to do a quiz that will be testing exactly what they have been taught throughout the module, all the grammatical phenomenons, etc., etc. And this is how you're going to do it. You're going to divide, let's say, your classroom into boys versus girls if you want, or either way, you can just split it down the middle. And then they have to compete and the winners, I don't know, it can be an incentive that you know we would be allowed to do in your school. You know, give them, I don't know, chocolate or fruit, or they could leave 5 minutes early, or anything that you think would work for your classroom, okay? So I assure you, the effect that this will have on your students will be magnificent. When I first, a colleague of mine told me this a few years ago, and I tried it out with my students, and they actually come to the school excited to do the quiz, which, by the way, all the questions in the quiz are questions from that particular module. Okay, so here, for example, I have a screenshot of you from the IWB, where it's from Unit 1, okay? So all the questions will be the vocabulary that students were taught in Unit 1, the grammar that they were taught in Unit 1, and so on and so forth. I will show you some of the IWB towards the end of the session, but I just want to show you a small screenshot for now. Sorry. Now, let's go on to the next issue that students face. Students quite often don't see the practicality of studying grammar. So what is the best way for us to help students see this? Well, it's to show them that grammar is not just a cold thing that's left to the side and just to do a test at the end of the module. Grammar is part of our communication. Grammar is necessary. Different grammatical structures are necessary for different types of communication, depending on what message we're trying to put across. So, for example, here we have a unit on global warming and ecological systems, okay? Now, when we're talking about global warming, we're talking about something that's happening now, but something that has been happening or happened in the past that has affected the future. So we're talking, so students will need to know present perfect. They will need to know past simple. So first of all, we're going to show them the modular page. We're going to tell them, okay, ladies and gents, boys and girls, we're going to talk about this. This is going to be our module for the next few weeks. For example, this is vocabulary that we're going to cover. This is the grammar that we are going to cover. This is the pronunciation, and so on and so forth. So students get a first glimpse of this, okay? Then we're going to give them more input. So we're going to do reading passages. The students are going to be able to I can see them in the reading passage, for example. So I understand why I have to know about present perfect and the past simple when we're talking about these kind of issues. Then we're going to ask students to have a look, to do some activities, some critical thinking activities. We're talking about students of the 21st century. Which effects of global warming has your country experienced? Discuss it with your partner. We always bring it back to the students. And this is a very, very important thing I want to point out. Whether we're doing grammar or listening or speaking or writing or reading, we always bring it back to the students. Why? Because it's important for them to know that, yes, learning about Anglo-Saxon countries is great, fantastic. But you know what's really great? Knowing about your country, knowing about your life, knowing about yourself, talking about yourself, and make it, the students can relate to that a lot more. So but not only is it important for students to have a lot of input when it comes to the grammar, it's important for us to show them that the importance of grammar is for communication, whether that be to receive it or to provide it. So, and the best way to do this is by providing students with lots of opportunity to use grammar through communication. So the activity on the left, we saw before, okay? Then you come back to activities such as, which of the social issues in exercise 4 are the most serious in your country, for example, collect information. We're talking about students of 2023. Any chance they have to do some ICT research, do some, research overall, they will enjoy, okay? And of course, to write about it, not just to talk about it. It's very, very important. All right, last but not least, it's important for students to understand that knowing grammar is not just about knowing the rules or the structure. It's important for them to also know how to use it. And that's, again, the best way to do so is through activities. Now, let's quickly move on. What are some general rules for grammar teaching? It's important that we only teach students grammar that is required for the lesson. It's important that we take the needs of the students into account when we're doing grammar. And what do I mean by this? First of all, we're talking about students of 2023. What does that mean? That means students who also enjoy technology, students who have different needs to what we had when we were students, okay? It doesn't mean about better or worse, it just means different. So for instance, let's say I want students to talk to me about, we want to practice past tenses, okay? And we want students to, I want them to provide me something in a communicative way. Now, let's say I wanted to write about, in the past, we would write a letter to a pen friend, okay? Now, if you ask your students of 2023 to write a letter to their pen friend, do you know what the question might be? What is a pen friend? So that is not taking their needs into account. What would be is to say, you know what, actually, why don't you create a vlog for me, a video log, or write a blog, or let's do a news report, something that will makes it interesting for them, they can relate to it, and this together will give them sense and meaning to new learning. It's really important that we make every step challenging, but just motivating enough for our students. It's important that students feel involved in the learning process, that we are listening to their needs and their wants to a certain extent, of course, okay? And if necessary, like I mentioned before, if it's the presentation of the grammar is too big, we'll just break it down, okay? Again, so here just have a small example of you would present the information to the students, would give them the structure, and then we'll practice it until they get to the part where they would act out a dialogue, as you can see in the bottom left corner. For example, act out a dialogue about what you usually do with your parents at weekends and what you are doing with them this weekend. So here we're talking about linking verbs, okay? We're going to talk about active or inactive verbs and so on. Now, as we know, linking verbs are words that complement the subject, okay? So my mom is strict, for instance. So instead of just going through the grammatical phenomenon with the students, okay, we could use different ways to consolidate and to elicit that information from our students. How do we do that? So for instance, I'm going to show you 2 videos that I would do with my students. And I would say to them, through using linking verbs, provide me the answers to these videos. So here, these 2 videos are things that we're going to watch to a certain extent, and then you have to guess what is going to happen. Let's take a quick look here.
Box. Open it up.
So, ladies and gentlemen, let me see if you're all still here with me. What do you think is going to happen in this video? What do you think the baby is going to do with that ball? I know what I would probably do if I was that baby. I would probably, the baby will throw that ball away. Okay, let's have a look. What else? Who else thinks, are there any other options? Does anybody want? Okay, so yep, the baby, no, thank God the baby did not hit the dog, but the baby did eat the dog's food, which I'm sure the dog's not very happy about. Anyway, these were just a few examples of ways that we can elicit that grammatical structure without it being the usual gap fill formation activities, which still get students practicing and communicating just in a very different way. Right, now let's move on swiftly now. So we're going to go on to the next part of the presentation, which I want to talk us a little bit about. Now, we've talked about why students don't write grammar. We've talked about what we can do in the classroom to make it more interesting or engaging for students. Now, very quickly, I want us to talk about different kinds of grammar that we do in the classroom. So we have inductive versus deductive. So a deductive approach to grammar is when we present the grammatical structures and then it's followed by examples and ways that students can apply this in the classroom. The inductive approach to grammar is when we start with, we provide them with the context and students have to draw out the grammatical structure through the context which is inferred. Now, this is according to Thornbury, 1999. Essentially, if I'm being very honest with you, in my opinion, both of these approaches are good to have in the classroom, okay? So, for example, in a deductive approach, we would provide the students with the grammatical structure, like I mentioned before. We would go through it, we would present it to them, and then students will, of course, get to activate it through the activities. In a deductive approach, okay, we would give them, for example, you have a dialogue here, as you can see. There's two girls say, "Are you visiting your grandparents this weekend?" "No, my cousin is staying with us these days. We're going to Bath for the weekend." So this, of course, the students would have to infer the present continuous, which they can then look up, see the grammatical rule, and of course, they will activate it immediately as well. So both of these approaches are very effective for students. And I'm sure you already use both of them in the classroom anyway, but it's important that it's important just to go over it. And our last but definitely not least, I want us to talk about the 5 key stages to teaching English. First of all, we've got the presentation. So students so we would present the grammatical structure, whichever approach you use, whether you want to use the deductive or the inductive, okay? We present it in the classroom. Then, of course, we want the comprehension. Through elicitation, we would understand if students have understood the grammatical structure or if they need to be presented once again. Then the students would have to provide to us explanations. So, for example, I would put this word there because this, and this, for example, this rule, for instance. Of course, then we need to provide students ample opportunity to practice, like we mentioned before, through more controlled practice, gap fills, small sentences, eventually leading up to communicative expression, where students get to write about it, talk about it, present it, do a project on it, and so on. So let's have a really quick look. So first of all, here we're going to go back to the linking verbs. We will present it to the students. Now, as I mentioned before, you can present it via the book itself, through the structure, absolutely, or we can do that through the IWB, where students get to hear it in audio, they get to see the picture, get to see an example. This makes it even more interactive for the students overall, okay? So, or then, of course, we've got the comprehension. So, for instance, let's say we're using the interactive whiteboard software in the classroom. Students, so you would say, okay, so my brother is independent. Which one of these is linking? The linking verb, sorry. Okay, why is it linking? What does it do? We would elicit that information from the students, trying to get understand why it is. Okay. Then students would have to be able to refer back to the rules that we presented them, that they have inferred, and they would have to explain to us which part of the grammatical structure is placed where, and so on and so forth. These are just examples either from the interactive whiteboard software or through the book. As you can see, it's the same information. Okay, and of course, practice makes perfect. So as you can see here again, students are going to get to practice through a variety of activities, making sure it's engaging and interesting for them. And last but definitely not least, we're going to give them the opportunity for communicative expression. As you can see here, making sentences about your family or your friends, using these linking verbs and your own ideas. So students are communicating about it, they're practicing and they're activating the grammatical structure, all while bringing it back to them so they can talk about themselves, the parents, and so on and so forth. Now, grammar can be fun, and I'm sure you'll agree. And as a matter of fact, punctuation quite often can also save lives. As you can see here, let's eat, kids. Let's eat, kids. Okay. Now, before I get off, what I would like to show you very quickly is I'm going to stop sharing just for a second. I'd like to show you the grammar sections that I mentioned before through the IWB. Just give me 1 quick second, and I will. There we are. Let's have a look. Now, as I mentioned before, all of the theory that I mentioned to you and the practical examples are things that I have personally used in my classroom and things that my colleagues have used in their classroom also. However, what I would like to point out is that obviously all of the examples that I showed you today, all of the modules, the units, the grammatical structures, the activities, they were all from the Bright title, which has been approved by the ministry in Vietnam, and obviously it's available for you to use in your schools. It is a book that has been created for the students of today, for the students of now, preparing them for tomorrow, okay? With ample opportunity and activities for them to find enjoyable, and for you as well, and for the learning to be both efficient and effective. Now, very, very quickly, I think we've got about 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. All right, okay, so very quickly in the next few minutes, I just wanted to show you the grammar section. So as you can see here, we have our grammar, okay? So we'll have the presentation of present simple and present continuous, all right? Very, very interesting for key fact for you teachers is one of the biggest issues that we as teachers face around the world is not having enough time in the classroom. So with these 3 little dots right here, by pressing this, you have all your answers available. Students, of course, don't have access to this, only you do. Now, at the bottom right corner, as you can see here that I'm showing you now, we have an owl. So during the lesson, if you want to refer back to the rule, the grammatical rule of this, whatever grammatical structure you have been teaching, you can press on it and it all pops up along with the uses of it. And actually, if you keep clicking, you have visual implementation here of the grammatical structure, and of course,
she usually starts work at 9 a.m.
along with audio, which is always good to have in the classroom. So at this moment, grammar isn't some black and white boring thing that we have in the classroom. Grammar is now interactive. It has audio, it has pictures, brings it to life, and it makes a massive difference when it comes to what students enjoy doing or not. Okay, so I'm very briefly going to go through these activities because we've already seen them. What I want to show you is the end communicative activity. Students have learned the grammatical structure, they have practiced, they have talked about it, they've listened to it, and now they need to converse. So instead of just asking students to do a simple gap fill exercise, what we're asking them is act out a dialogue about what you usually do with your parent at weekend and what you are doing with them this weekend, as an example. But because we're asking them to communicate, this cannot be done without providing them with an example. So we have the example down written for them in written form. And
what do you usually do with your parents at weekends?
I usually play cards with my dad and go.
Now, don't worry, I'm not going to make you listen to all of it, but it does make a big difference as to how students see the grammar overall. And as I mentioned to you before, we try to make grammar interesting. We try to make it engaging. So we can do that through offering students the opportunity to watch a video, like this one, for example. Now, if, for example, you have a big class, of course, and you want to make it the screen even bigger, we will do so by doing this, all right?
Can we close the gap? Today, I want to talk about difficult relationships between teenagers and parents.
Now, we're not going to watch the entire video. What I want to show you is that they're documentary style videos where students will find it interesting. They're not cartoons, for example, and they're all practicing the vocabulary, the grammar, and all the structures that were taught in the actual module. Okay, let me just pop back. And of course, at the end of each of the videos, my apologies, you have comprehension questions and critical thinking questions, which always have a model available for the students as well. And last but not least, I mentioned to you before, one of the best ways to guarantee that students will do their homework, they will do revision, is the quizzes, for instance. Okay?
It's quiz time.
I'm going to quickly show this to you. All right. So you choose, for example,
Team
students.
Team A. It's your turn. Read, listen, and complete. What's going on, Dad? Why is Mum looking at you so...
All right, so
A.
what do we think
Angry.
the right answer is?
B. Happy. C. Angrily. D. Excited.
All right, someone told me it's C. Let's have a look.
Great!
Perfect.
The correct
Now-
answer is...
So imagine doing this with your students instead of doing revision. I'm not saying we're never going to do revision again and we're never going to do tests again, because these are also part of our learning experience for our students as well. But quizzes, these kinds of quizzes that we have already made for you, are a fantastic way of practicing what students already know, but doing it in a way that's interesting for them. It gives them a different spin on learning. It makes it more captivating, much more engaging for students. And I assure you, if you use it, you will see a massive difference. The next time you say the word grammar, we're going to have less of frowning and more of a happy face, hopefully, eventually, over time. Okay, I think that's my time for the first session, if I'm not mistaken. I'm just going to stop sharing now. If, of course, you would like to see more of the IWB, I can show that in the next session, not a problem at all. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen now.